Bam! MC is in the house. What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chem, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I am here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, deep diving, having a good time while doing it. So, if you guys have not yet signed up to my email list, you got to do that. You go to masterchimletter.com. I don't know if you're watching on YouTube or one of the Facebook channels, but the link is going to be in the description to do that. I'm always forgetting to take care of business on these calls. So at least if I get the email thing out, I'll feel like I've done my job. Got a bunch of people on already. Let's see who's here. Judge Cohen in the house. Fresh from Pressure Con last weekend. Good to see you, brother man. Jesse, what's up, my dude? We got Yarn Sachs in the house. What's up, darling? Good to see you. My man, Big Cap. What's going on, brother man? Hope you're well. Corey, good to see you, brother man. Johnny Groove in the house. Very good. Phil, afternoon, late morning. Right on. Big Pat, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. Jamie, my man up in Canada. I hope the little lady's watching also. And all is well. Right on. So we got I sat down this morning, and this is a topic that, I can't say I've never addressed it in some way before, but I'm always looking for, more concise, succinct, formulaic approaches to these types of topics. With the intention being, if I could frame it a little bit more clearly, people could walk away with a little bit more power. Ultimately, it's not my job to fix the world. I'm not trying to make the world a better place. I'm not trying to end hunger and create world peace or any other obnoxious, narcissistic life goal that some people, are told they're supposed to have. My whole thing is I want to become more powerful. I want to discover more about myself. I want to put my ideas out there and allow them to be forged, by feedback and friction and sometimes, debate and conflict. In doing that, my plan is to generate more alliances organically, allow people to hear what I'm about and want to connect in the way that is mutually beneficial. That's the value of alliances. So I think there is a good reason, a strong reason, a powerful reason to put ourselves out there and share our ideas, even though it's not to manifest, the outcomes that some people may think they're supposed to. So I hope that makes sense. That was a mouthful. John Wiley, what's up, brother man? I see you. Good to see you. Another guy that was at Pressure Con this past weekend. Those of you guys that are not making it to Pressure Con, I guess the easy thing to say is you're fucking up. We had an incredible time. We went over some incredible stuff. I introduced for the first time, I got a copy here, my Three Roads Manifesto. It was such a good time. And, I don't want to just talk about Pressure Con for the whole, show today, because we do have some content. But I will say that I'd be lying if I said I wasn't sort of surfing the energy that was built, this past weekend. I've been fired up all week, and even today's, show is going to be a testament to that. So why the weak worship comfort? Why the weak worship comfort? Weak men, on its face, I'd say, it kind of makes sense. If I say that, people, especially people that tend to align with my positions on things, they'll hear that and they'll go, yeah, they do. But I think it's helpful to articulate why, articulate how that exactly happens. The thing about, weak men is, it's easy to say that they want to be comfortable, that they pursue comfort, but it's not just pursuing comfort. It's not just, retaining or sustaining comfort wherever they can. It's that they worship it. Meaning that is the goal. That is the God, so to speak. I try not to get into religion, during these talks too much, because I don't want to disarm people from my messages for unnecessary purposes. But there is something to be said for the promise of comfort, and what that means and what that signifies. I've always looked, I'm full of shit if I say I've always. At one point, I was a baby and I used to scream when I'd shit my pants. So I can't say that I had all these beliefs my entire life, right? So let's keep it real, right? But the point I was going to make is I've always, as an adult, tended to look at comfort as a milestone, right? The guys that are in my mastermind groups, the guys that I do coaching with, I always try to have them position goals and targets as milestones. It's something to denote a direction. And when we reach it, it means we've been moving, right? Movement is mandatory. It's not the utopia. It's not the end game. It's not the set it and forget it. We made it. We did it, that sort of thing. So comfort is always, I would say, feedback of getting stronger or being in a stronger position. That's why what stressed you out before, or what more generally made you uncomfortable before, is now no longer making you uncomfortable, leaving comfort in its place. So it's definitely a sign of a move in the right direction, right? So the fact that, they worship comfort, and I made a quote this morning in today's email. Of course, I don't have it up, but the idea of it is, comfort isn't given to people. It's acquired through your own efforts. But when we think it's given, or when comfort is given by somebody else, we have to understand it's never going to be something that has actually made you stronger. It's usually a sort of protection against what is making you uncomfortable by the individual affording or offering you, providing the comfort itself. In the quote this morning, I said something to the effect is, whenever comfort is given, it's given as a leash. Because that's the thing. The people that offer to make you more comfortable are those that are seeking to control you. Now, I could say that, and I think it's true that those people that are looking to control you may not even do that with intent. That might not be their plan. They might not be acting nefariously, against, your ability to be aware. But that is exactly the outcome. I was watching one of these YouTube shorts, when they just auto generate, and there was the rapper, I think it was Master P, the rapper Master P. I think it was him, and he was talking about how he had an aunt that he bought a house for, and years later, sometime later, maybe it wasn't years, but sometime later, she called him and said that not only was her house being taken from her, but that it was his fault. I don't know whether she was, borrowing against the house or whatever the case was, but here was Master P offering to make his aunt comfortable. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't helping her. He was actually now giving her something that she was unable to sustain herself. And lo and behold, as soon as that started to wane, as soon as that started to erode, she came back to him and was like, yeah, fix it again. So when people offer you comfort, you have to understand that there's nothing inherent in you that is improved. Your experience might be more palatable, more to the point comfortable. But if somebody is providing that for you, you haven't done anything, which means you are now becoming, addicted to, if not at least assimilated to, a life that is being provided by somebody else, right? And that's the issue with this. That's the problem for this, or with this, right? Power comes at a price, and the price is going to be paid by somebody. And if it's not being paid by you, chances are it's being paid by somebody else, and if you're somebody who's weak, if you're somebody who doesn't have anything, how do you pay for that? Usually you pay in submission, right? What is my man Cap here? Alexander Rutherford. I'm so not used to calling you Alexander Rutherford, Cap. But Cap writes, don't pray for an easy life. Strive to have the strength to endure and adapt to a difficult one. Absolutely right. And my man Cap himself is somebody who's been through some shit and hasn't wilted, stepped up to the plate. He's a single dad, special needs son. He's been through the ringer. Not only is he working, he's written a couple of books. He's trained martial arts. Like there are decisions that people can make at certain crossroads. And it's worth noting that the outcome isn't always up to you. The whole idea is to not submit, because all you're ever going to be able to do is, number one, what's in your control, right? You can't change the weather. You can't change certain outcomes. Those of us, that have had lives that have, been wrought with, if not at least affected by tragedy, we know, yeah, we wish we could snap our finger and some people who aren't here would be back, but that's not our power to have. So what is the alternative then? What should we be focusing on then? And again, it's control the controllable. And one of my other phrases that I would apply here, a man's job is to do a day's worth of work daily. So whatever you can do in a day, you do it, because you can't do any more than a day's worth of work. If you can, then that other level is the day's worth of work. But the problem that most people have isn't that they're trying to do too much. It's usually that they're trying to do not enough, or they haven't done what they were supposed to do over an extended amount of time, and then they try to compensate by going overboard, which doesn't work either, right? Corey writes, this is how we end up with third world villages completely dependent on first world assistance to survive. We help people to death. Yeah, and my father was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and he really, later on in life, he passed some years back. He really had a desire to connect me with that part of him, and it just, it wasn't in the cards, And I used to joke with him because he and my mother have a house in Puerto Rico, and he would always say, you need to come and visit. And and my reply was always, I'll go to Puerto Rico as soon as you get rid of the Puerto Ricans. Right? I was being kind of a dick. I used to bust my father's chops. But the idea of it is, I don't want to be around people who are weak. I don't want to be around people who aren't looking to get by. I'm not, who aren't looking to, I should say, are only looking to get by and not looking to become powerful. I don't care about wealth and things like that. That's certainly not the intention. But even my father said, he bought the house in the town where he grew up. And when he first went there, he never told me this. He told my mother. She had since shared it with me, that when he first went there, he had woken up, one morning early because he remembers the mornings of when he was a kid, and he wanted to have, I guess, this nostalgic experience of this village or this town he grew up in those early hours. And he said nobody left their house till like fucking 11 o'clock or noon. And he said he couldn't understand it. Then the first of the month came around. Everybody was out nice and early, down to get their checks, their government checks. Now, my father is a product of that environment. My father was not only hardworking, provided for my mother and my brother and I, but Vietnam veteran, Green Beret in Nam, like built a business of his own while he also worked in a hospital as a foreman, like did all these different things, was the pinnacle of no excuses, get it done type of mentality. Well, he is from that environment. So what's the difference? I wasn't, trying to denigrate, his upbringing. I wasn't trying to denigrate certainly who he was. It's my dad, but I also knew that even he had already seen that being on the teat of the government just diminishes a person's power, right? And it is exactly overlapped with what we're talking about now. So, Corey, you are spot on with that, right? So, here's the thing that getting into what this looks like, because I'm always looking to codify things, and I use some fancy stuff to actually make a visual. So, I want to introduce what this process looks like in the form of a graphic that hopefully I know how to fucking figure out and put on the screen. Bam. Do you like that one or that one? Let's do that one. And if you can't see what the words say, you are just like me because I can't fucking see it either, right? But so what I have to do, this is why you should test these things, Justin. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open the file separately so I can fucking see what the hell it says, right? So now, whereas I did write this, you have my word. I did not memorize it, right? So let's get into this. And this is called the chain of submission. A bunch of different working titles. I decided on the chain of submission. I didn't want to imply a cycle where this is concerned because it's not a cycle. Sometimes once, or I would say most of the time when somebody reaches this last stage of this chain, and I'm presenting it all at once because I want everybody to take it all in at once, even though I'll go through it in sequence. But once somebody's has reached a point where they're attacking the free, there is no sort of reclamation or starting over at a different level. It's really all these things tend to compound and be included in that individual moving forward, right? So there are 7 steps here, and we're going to start off with, I should post that photo, please. So can you guys see this on the screen? Listen, you guys know I do a lot of thinking. I do a lot of writing, but half the shit I have in technology, I don't know how to fucking work. So can you guys see the graphic on the screen right now? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Right on. Okay. So Jan Saxa, what I'll do is I promise I will remember to do this. Can you make a promise to remember something? Is that a thing? What I'll do is I'll send an email out and I'll link this photo. Or I'll just post it on social media. How about that? You might not be able to see it on social media. I don't know. I'll put it in the email. I'll upload it somewhere, put it in the email so you guys will be able to see it. So how about that? If you're not getting my emails, fuck you. You're not getting a picture, right? So let's get into it. All right. So the chain of submission, starting off with avoiding pressure. So seeking comfort to escape stress. This isn't, a very complicated idea. This idea of avoiding pressure is sort of the feedback that we get in general, where the hot stove, we tend to pull away. There are all sorts of sort of evolutionary instincts that have served us well, that have allowed us to thrive in environments that were usually hostile to our, better outcomes. So avoiding pressure is something. But here's the thing. Some time ago, we developed the ability to think, to conceptualize, right? To rationalize. And that's when the storyteller was born, right? If you guys have ever watched my identity frame video in the self-power course that I sell, I've showed it before, but it's basically there's 3 components, to the identity, and you guys can see the whole fucking thing right now. I don't care. But there's the man in the mirror, right? Self-image, and then by the narrative, there's the storyteller. And then the projection, there's the mask, right? So that the archetypes of this identity frame are the man in the mirror, the storyteller, and the mask. Well, when we evolved the ability to rationalize and have this sort of consciousness, the storyteller was born. And with the story, we also can activate through abstraction our sympathetic nervous system, right? The fight or flight response. When there's a threat that we sort of need to focus on and our body needs to become momentarily optimized to be able to deal with this threat. That's something that from an evolutionary standpoint was very functional. Adrenaline, awareness, all those different things. If you're about to go to the bathroom and all of a sudden you see a threat and that sympathetic nervous system kicks in, you don't have to go to the bathroom anymore. So all these sorts of things are optimized for dealing with these threats. Well, the problem happened when we now acquired the ability to trigger that just through consciousness. That's where stress started being a thing. That's where the symptoms of stress started being a thing. Because just like we have a means to activate that system, we also have a means to deactivate that system, the parasympathetic system. Well, if we don't know how to manage that, we wind up always stressed to some extent, or maintaining at least for unnatural, unhealthy periods of time this stressed situation or the stressed mode. Over time, that winds up telling us that pressure's bad. Pressure leads to stress. We don't want to be stressed. We start to assign blame to stress because we could think a lot about what the process is, and we come up with the conclusion we should avoid pressure. Now, obviously, I'm the pressure to power guy. I'm the guy that understands, certainly not the first guy to say that, to share this concept in some form, but everything we have in terms of power has come by way of a process laden with pressure. That's the way it happens. No pressure, no power. So right off the bat, avoiding pressure is the first step in the wrong direction. That ultimately leads to the second link in the chain here. Probably should have made it links on the chain. You got a ribbon. We'll be all right. Maybe we'll change that in time. Doesn't matter. So the second link is seeking comfort, and it's finding solace in familiar surroundings. So when we seek comfort, it's the person that would rather watch TV all day. He'd rather stay home. He'd rather not take any chances. He'd rather not go to new places. He'd rather not meet new people. It's the person who, because they're avoiding pressure, they're now seeking comfort. And the only way they know to seek comfort is in those aspects of their lives that comfort was already present. So they tend to want to sustain those environments or those situations where comfort was present, which now leads to the third part. The third part is they accept control. Why are they accepting control? Because they just want to stay comfortable. So it gets to the point where if somebody suggests they do something to stay comfortable, and comfort is their goal because they want to avoid pressure, they're going to accept control. They're going to give their sense of agency and autonomy to somebody else because they don't want the responsibility of doing that because the outcome to them isn't worth it. They're already being comfortable here. Why would I want to be the leader of my own, destiny when I would just want to be comfortable, and comfortable's right here, right? So sure, you be in control. You tell me where to go, what to do. You make all the big decisions so long as I'm comfortable. So long as you let me watch my game, right? Play the video games, the sports, all of that nonsense. Doom scroll, watch the reality TV show. Like it goes on and on, right? So that's how you accept control. After they accept control, what happens after that? Obviously, lockstep with giving somebody else control is you lose independence. You lose that autonomy. So what does that mean? It means now you can't leave, right? It's that whole thing. I've given everybody control of my autonomy. And now if should ever I have the instinct or drive to do something outside of the world that I allowed myself to be reduced to, now I can't, right? Because I've lost that independence, which again makes me turn back and head to where I had already sort of retired to prior. After I've lost that dependence, what winds up happening is I now know that if I want to maintain that or if I want to grow at all, I have to worship those people that are in power. I have to plead to those people that are in control to give me more, right? To allow me to have what I already had. So those people are the ones who are in control. Everything that I have that is good, I ask them or I thank them for providing it for me. Everything that isn't good, I plead with them to change it so that it's comfortable once again. After that, we're basically controlled. We're disconnected from our autonomy, our independence. It just makes sense that at some point we're going to fear freedom because freedom represents uncertainty, right? We start developing anxiety towards independence. It's the mental exercise. Would you rather be the poor, struggling, freed slave in the woods, in the forest, or would you rather be the kept, secured, protected slave in the field or the house, right? It's that exercise. And some people would opt for the comfort, right? But part of that is you have been made to believe that, well, you're not worthy, you're not capable of maintaining a free lifestyle. You need to be protected, right? Well, who's going to pave the roads? It's that whole thing, not to start to get too political, but who's going to do all the things for us that at one point in history we knew that nobody ever did for us, right? Everything that we've ever needed, we were able to provide for ourselves tribally. But at some point, we're disconnected from our ability, certainly the obligation to do that. We start to argue that who are we without that? So we start to fear freedom, which eventually leads to the inevitable last step, where we start attacking the free. We start showing aggression towards those who are independent because they're going to make the masters angry at us. They're going to ruin it for everybody. We got a good thing. It's the character Cypher in Matrix, where he ratted out his boys because he just wanted to be back in the Matrix, didn't want to be any the wiser, just wanted to live in a place where certainty was guaranteed, right? So that is the chain of submission. And like I said, I will put that in an email and a link so you guys will have access to that. All right. FL Treasure, what's up? Says leftists opt for the comfort always, and adds that's where leftist authoritarianism, I promise I know how to say the word, gets its backing from. Yeah, and that's what winds up happening when you have these people who have already sort of slid down that process to where they're attacking the free. Somehow my opinion of what I want to do in my life is affecting their ability to lead their lives. As illogical as that sounds on its face, that seems to be at the core of what a lot of them want to argue. In order for me to be free, you need to act a certain way. They don't, it's like the irony escapes them when they say that out loud. I think when an individual, looks at how, collectives, groups tend to identify as a collective, something gets lost in that process. In my manifesto, I talk about the three roads and the concept of three roads I've shared, it's been a couple of years now, but never at the detail of the manifesto that I just wrote. But the basic premise is, not getting into too many details there, the basic premise is there is the self, there is the tribe, and then there is value. If we allow value to lead, we find people who connect us to that value. If we allow the tribe to lead, we allow the tribe to tell us, who we're supposed to be. And I'm always going to advocate for starting with yourself. Your loyalty first and foremost needs to be with yourself, because when you understand who you are and you are overlapped and in sync with your own identity, you're then able to make alliances that are congruent with your identity, which tend to make better alliances. And these alliances, once aligned with the self, now give you a situation where you can create value without having to compromise, those alliances you have, or the self-alliance, the relationship with you that you've already established. With leftists, it seems to be, well, no, we're all going to be, in this group, the greater good, that whole phrase. Well, there is no greater good. There's, maybe a greater good from an individual standpoint, like this is good, this is better, better in that instance would be a greater good, I guess, just to use the word good. But this idea of there being a collective of people that somehow we are born at a deficit or a debt of obligation to, it's pure nonsense, and it's how the weak argue to become strong. You think of a guy like Al Sharpton, that fat fucking weak useless fuck. Like what is he doing with his life if he doesn't have a bunch of people to manipulate, into feeling, it's the I'm going to create a problem so I could create the solution, and everybody will look to me for the solution and not blame me for creating the problem dynamic. And a guy like that, that's how he winds up sustaining himself. with everybody thinking that collectively we're all responsible for everybody else and everybody else's decisions, everybody else's mistakes, and I just choose to opt out of that. It's like, no, I'm going to do what I want. There's going to be consequences with how I act, and those consequences are always what I measure. But some sort of collective morality that dictates what's good and bad through no influence or input of my own, it's like, yeah, that's not the game I'm choosing to play, right? So you have these people that once they sort of go through that chain to the point where they're even attacking other people just because those other people are representing or identifying as free and living, not worshiping the people in control and not doing all the things that this weak person is doing. Now you have the idea, or you have it just begs the question, what are you supposed to do at that point? We don't want to go through the chain of submission. We don't want to be one of these people that completely ignores his own power for the sake of getting along or for what he's been convinced is the greater good, right? If you haven't done anything and somebody tells you you're supposed to do something for the greater good, just understand they see you as existing in a state of debt, right? You didn't do anything. You didn't make any promises to anybody. You didn't fuck anything up. But for some reason, they're compelling you to do something. It means that they don't even accept you as an individual yet, right? You are already in debt. When people speak like that, that is the implications of that reasoning, right? So if we're choosing then, to not be a part of that, what's the alternative? So we have to, develop, and I didn't make a fancy graphic for this, but we want to then walk the path of strength. And obviously, if the first person or if the first stage is avoiding pressure, then we have to choose pressure. We have to choose pressure for all the reasons that I had explained a few moments ago. It's one of those things that, allows us to forge who we are. Movement through the world is friction, right? It's that interaction with all those things that we are not while we are who we are, engaging in a way that creates friction, creates feedback, the feedback of friction. Pressure begins with that first interaction. Pressure begins with that first movement. Choosing pressure is choosing movement. It's choosing life, right? I just happen to have my life affirming shirt on. I told you guys before, whenever I wear this in public, people think it's a, like the whole abortion thing. Like I believe there's choice and is it life? What is it? Choose life? I don't know. This is how disconnected I am. I know the lesbians want the pro-choice, pro-life, pro-choice and pro-life. That's what it is, right? So people always say that they think this is a pro-life shirt. And it is, but not for the reasons they think. It ain't got a fucking thing to do with abortion, right? So the idea is, if we're choosing pressure, it means we're choosing to engage the ecosystem where all of our opportunities are to be found. When we avoid pressure, we avoid the sort of playground of opportunity, right? So right at its face, we have to pivot off that first step. The first link of that chain is avoiding pressure. We have to choose pressure. The thing with comfort too, and I had mentioned this before, comfort isn't inherently bad. Comfort isn't something we're supposed to reject. I'm not an advocate for asceticism, this whole idea where we just have to suffer and put ourselves through this physical pain, this mental anguish. Like, no, that's fucking nonsense. Because, see, comfort and discomfort are byproducts of the pursuit of power, right? So whether we're comfortable or uncomfortable, that's almost an aside to what our intent should be, which is becoming more powerful, right? And becoming more powerful, I talk about it in the manifesto. There's two parts of power: self-power and real power, which is internal power and external power. And there's a lot of details and nuance in the book that describes that. I've spoken about it before, but the idea of it is that is the thing that we should be setting our sights according to. That's the currency that we're looking to operate under, not just comfort or discomfort in and of themselves, right? So comfort should be used strategically. It should be used as the feedback that reminds us we're moving in the right direction, right? That's not to be confused with those instances where somebody is providing us comfort. If somebody is providing us comfort, they're also getting control as a result. Because if we pivot our life according to the ability that given comfort provides us, they could always remove that comfort, and any life that we've built is going to collapse like a house of cards. So when I say that we want to use comfort strategically, I'm saying comfort that we've actually earned through progressing and becoming stronger, right? We always want to reject comfort when it compromises freedom. So here, if we're talking about the goal being becoming more powerful, then there needs to be a context, a criteria that comfort is accepted or rejected. And just like we know that comfort could be a testament or feedback of us getting stronger, it could also be in exchange for a little bit of our freedom. And this might not have an identity behind it, right? So before I said, if anybody's giving you comfort, they're controlling you. Where there might be things in life where we could get a little bit of comfort, but we are giving up some of our freedom. And I would advocate against that. And the reason I don't say it just in some sort of absolute sense is we have to be realistic. Not everybody's ready to drink from the fire hose, so to speak. There is a progress or process of progress, I should say. And we have to be aware of that. So there are going to be a time where, we're only capable of a certain amount of freedom. And it's hard to articulate that, just in the boundaries of this short, YouTube talk. But I'll say it this way. Everybody is going to get stronger if they are under pressure, if they are being pressured. There's a forging process. But there is a function zone in pressure. Not enough pressure, and you're not stimulating a response. You're not stimulating, any process that winds up with you being more powerful. But too much pressure, and you melt, you break. So when I say, reject comfort when it compromises freedom, what I want to just sort of add to that is there is a point where we're just too free, meaning we're not strong enough to maintain the lack of support that we're trading, at that moment, right? I remember when I was a young man, I had a cousin, right, male cousin, and his best friend hated his parents. They had some sort of family drama going on. But these are all city kids, by the way, right? And my cousin's best friend got a rifle, a bag of supplies, and was planning on moving into the woods and become one of these hermits living off the grid. He was, I think, 18 at the time. I was probably only like 9, 10 years old. And all I know is that kid lasted like a month and then came back with his tail between his legs and had to revisit, the plan. He had ultimate freedom, but he didn't have the power to go along with it. Now, if there was no, society to come back to, would he have made it? Who knows? Maybe. But removing society, I would say, would be the only way to find out. Because all he knew is that he was now starting to lose his identity. And he had to reclaim some of that support that society had represented. He wound up not going back to his parents, but he was like, all right, the whole woods thing, yeah. Maybe if you grow up in the city, you're not ready to just move to the woods permanently, right? He found that out, on his own. So what do we got here? John Saxa writes, pro-life with a dose of reality. That's right. That's right. This ain't got nothing to do with abortion unless you're trying to abort people, in like the 60th month, etc. I think it was my man Tuan Tom that said, yeah, I believe in abortion up to the 60th trimester or something. Just a joke, but I got to give him credit for it. All right. FL Treasure writes, they see life and they freak out because of their particular fanaticism. They only see what they want to see. Well, I would say such is life, right? And most people in the aquarium, that's exactly what they see, and not to get on too much of a tangent, but that's another aspect of people's limitations that they just don't acknowledge. Like, you think your brain is capable of everything. I remember I didn't get into a debate or an argument, but somebody had pushed back on a short video that I shared on YouTube regarding truth, and I was talking about truth. And ironically, I was saying most of the debates I've seen about truth, I've just seen as just a complete waste of fucking time, And my whole thing is, there is a thing when where I would call it true enough, where it's like, what are you doing to pursue power? And the sort of belief system that you have while pursuing power, are you winding up more powerful as a result? And if the answer is yes, then I would say, well, it's true enough. Because if somebody can win a battle of reason against somebody who is by all sort of objective, values doing better in life, right? Crushing life. But this person is in the game of reason and rationality winning. Who are we supposed to follow as a model? Who are we supposed to put on a pedestal, if any, but who are we supposed to say is better than the other? And my whole thing is, being the king of reason and rationality does not make somebody more powerful, and I think there's an arrogance, in the high intelligent, types, that because this is their superpower, they want that to, in and of itself, be the outcome of their value. And it's like, no, it's the whole Uncle Ben Spider-Man thing. With great power comes great responsibility. It's like, okay, you're still super smart, but you're also a fucking cunt. So maybe you're worse than the other guy next to you who's half as smart, who's doing just as well as you are. Maybe you're twice as bad. It's like you got two losers. One of them super high IQ, and one of them's average IQ. People would say, oh, well, this guy's better because at least he's high IQ. I would argue that he's worse because he's right at the same point, even though he has so much more capacity. So a little bit of a tangent. You know how I get, but I just wanted to share that. My man Jamie writes, when you stress an organic system, it requires rest. If it is to grow stronger and not just continue to break down, rest is important to building strength. Yeah, and to that point, I would say that when you look at the movement, obviously it's movement is mandatory, and movement needs to be a conversation, an exchange, a dynamic between two forces engaging one another. And there's always going to be a point like where we have the inhale, right? And then the exhale, and then the inhale, then the exhale. And that cyclical nature of movement should be looked for. So people who are redlining it, like you get a lot of this hustle grind culture, they don't realize that although, I don't subscribe to the regular parameters of how people should conduct themselves, I think, from a bigger perspective, from a meta perspective, it's like, yeah, you can't do this forever. At some point, you need to recharge. You need to reset. You need to reveal the other side of the coin, so to speak, right? Hope that makes sense. What else do we have here? We have here it is. FL Treasure writes, a good coach can provide us with comfort by reinforcing our positive gains through positive feedback. We have comfort knowing we're on the right path. And, we start to get, the waters start to get a little muddied when we rely solely on the terms, right? So that's one of the things, the limitations of language. It's that you could have a thing, and as soon as you name it, you reduce it. Right. And there's a bigger conversation to be had here. So here, a good coach, all these terms mean something. And for the sentiment to be, aligned with anything else that was said, all these terms would have to align also. Can provide us with comfort. I don't think a good coach provides anybody with comfort. I think it provides them with opportunity. I think a coach provides them with feedback, reinforcing our positive gains through positive feedback is a process, but some people may take that and not see that as comfort. We have comfort knowing we're on the right path. I think that's a good statement. And I'm almost being semantic with the one before that, because I don't disagree with the sentiment. I know what you're conveying. But just as an aside, this is why language gets clumsy. This is why sometimes, people who want to debate the ideas like truth, it's like, well, what is the outcome of this? What do you think is your actual like capabilities coming to a conclusion to figure out what truth is? And like if some person can argue for truth while the other person is just like almost being the devil's advocate, being a dick, being a pain in the ass, where he's like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about this? There's a certain point where, unless it could be tightly articulated to where that devil's advocate role no longer has the ability to counter, if that doesn't happen, then what winds up happening is the person who's arguing rationally conveys something to the effect that just means, something like, well, you know what I mean, or you're just being a pain in the ass, you're just being obtuse. It's like, well, if you want to win this battle of logic, your logic needs to be tight. And like 99% is not 100%, right? On my mastermind call this morning, we were talking about how some people operate as if probability could ever determine impossibility, depending on how low the odds are for something. And, I looked up the stat that the odds of being hit by lightning is like 1 in 1.2 million. But over the last 20 years, I think in America, 500 people were struck by lightning. It's like, did any one of those 500 people believe that it was a low probability of getting hit, by lightning? I would argue for those people, it was 100% because they were hit. It's like, yeah, but that's not the way probability works. No, actually, it is the way probability works. The whole 1 in 1.2 million means we have to operate from a perspective of including everybody. And sometimes when we talk about words, that's what happens. We start reducing our experience and our way to look at our lives through the perspective of everybody. And I remember Christopher Hitchens and some of the stuff he did, I loved. Some of it, I did the opposite. But when he got cancer, he was getting interviewed. And obviously, if you're not familiar with Christopher Hitchens, he was this pretty popular, atheist, figure, and that's certainly, not all he was, but certainly that's where he got a lot of his popularity in the mainstream. And the person interviewing him had asked him, like, you're this famous atheist, God is not great is one of his books and stuff. And the interviewer asked him, why do you think you got cancer? And Hitchens' response, as it should be, was, why not me? Like, what is it about me that makes me different? Or where I'm not exposed to the probability of these sorts of things happening. Like no laws of physics were defied by me getting cancer. He didn't say that part, but that being the implication. And I think that when people look to experience their life, and I'll reiterate this, they look to experience their life as a pursuit of becoming more powerful. They tend to not get distracted and bogged down by people that just want to talk about it or be the best at talking about it. I know too many people that every single day they get things done and they don't know at all how to articulate it in a way that the observers would describe it. What do I mean by that? I remember one time, Charles Poliquin, very famous strength coach. I was a big, avid fan of his in the late 90s, early 2000s. And he was doing an interview once, and there were some studies that supported things that he was saying for a couple of decades prior to that. And the person interviewing him asked something to the effect of, like, do you feel vindicated? That finally there were these peer-reviewed, studies that basically support the thing that you started saying a long time ago. And Poliquin's answer, paraphrasing, of course, was, once we in the gym, once we know something works, we do it because we know it works. Usually 10 to 20 years later, somebody does a study and they're allowed to agree with us that it works. It's like, well, we don't wait for them, and I would think that that's such a great philosophical, edict or philosophy, a take on it, where we're not looking to get permission from reason and rationality that what we know to be true is true just because we can't articulate it in their terms. I reject that whole thing. I'm just saying, be powerful, live life, do what you can do, right? When it comes to power, we build power through engaging resistance, not through seeking relief. It just so happens that when we become more powerful while engaging the resistance, we experience relief. But it's a testament to the changes we're making, not a change made to the level of resistance itself, right? And that's where people tend to go down the wrong path. Yarn Saxo writes, could it be enabling versus control? I mean, if we provide comfort over confrontation. Let me figure out the context of what that means. Could it be enabling versus control? I mean, if we provide comfort over confrontation. Well, again, too, I think what we need to do is not expect everybody to be operating under the best of intentions, at all times. So what do I mean by that? I mean, sometimes, yeah, if I'm looking to manipulate somebody, I will make them comfortable. I don't know if I'm necessarily enabling them in a way that helps or hurts them, but I may be manipulating them to the outcome that I desire. Sometimes, certainly, to look at it from a different angle, making somebody comfortable does not help them, although it does enable them to do the thing that wasn't productive in the first place. When people give money to homeless people, it's like, you got to understand that's for you. It's not for the homeless person. Like if you give a homeless guy $5 and you say, I wanted to buy him a sandwich, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's like, okay, you want him to buy him a sandwich. But when you make the mistake of, having the sandwich sentiment said in the form of, well, I wanted to help him, it's like, whoa. You're operating under the assumption that buying him a sandwich is helping him. And I would argue that it isn't. Every minute somebody spends going in the wrong direction means that there's more ground to make up later on. So if you're kicking the can, feeding him now, instead of getting him to confront his situation and turn it around, like another week, another month, another year in this direction is going to make him worse. It's going to make it that much harder. So I don't think that when we make people comfortable, we're always helping them, obviously. And I don't think I'm saying anything incredibly insightful here, just trying to anchor it into what we were talking about before. But I am usually somebody who is always looking to, there's never an elephant in the room with me. I'm always going to say the thing that there seems to be any pressure to not say. I'm always going to tell people the thing that I think they need to hear to become more powerful, which is not always the thing that they want to hear. And a lot of times is the thing that, jeopardizes my alliance with them, but I'd rather say the thing and sort of support any move that they have to make an adjustment than not say the thing and have to have an ally that I see eroding, right before my eyes. So these dynamics, when we're talking about dealing with other people, again, it comes down to how strong are you? Are you willing to allow somebody to deteriorate in front of you? Because what I would say, the alliance to them is more important to you than their power and how better off they are, and I would say that is not helping. I wouldn't say that that's something a productive, valuable ally would do, withhold information, right? Aaron says, not to be an ass, but you might actually die if you try to get a drink from a firehouse. Start with one attached to a house. Right? Touche. You're Canadian, so I'm going to speak French. Touche. City kid living in the woods, have a bapping around for a month isn't a bad run. It's a good take on it. Yeah, a month. Good on you, right? Look, Phil says the same thing. Surprised we made it a month. Right on. FL Treasure says, I agree, MC. Words can always be misread or distorted. That's why our Constitution has been so heavily undermined by legalistic word weasels. Right? Um, and that's the thing, don't ever apologize for typos here. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, don't worry about that. Because then I got to apologize. I fuck up all the time. You're right. And this gets at the heart of what I'm saying. The story about the Constitutional um, Convention coming to an end, and kids asking Ben Franklin, "What do we have?" And he says, "A republic, if we can keep it." The idea of it is, of course, we could self-destruct. Of course, we could just undermine the integrity of our own identity and vote bad laws and put bad people in charge that vote in, not only bad laws, but divert resources to places that undermine our integrity and sovereignty and success. Of course, that is what could happen. And how do they do it? They do it through the word weaseling. Now, although I am I would say a fan of the U.S. Constitution, I also know that there's a point where once enough people understand that might is right, the word weasels will be amongst the first to go. And whenever somebody's complaining, so many examples of this. I'll try to use one that doesn't get me in too much trouble. But when somebody's complaining about, what happened to me, or this happened to me, or, and the cops didn't answer, or, the government did this, or this person, the battle of somebody, stealing something, or, it's like there's a certain point where it's like, shut the fuck up, unless you're trying to recruit me, and this is like a strategy, which subconsciously it might be. They're trying to just have everybody empathize with them, so that it's like the whole Palestinian thing. If Israel's fucking them up, they should fuck Israel up. Oh, you can't? Okay, what's plan B? Get the world to empathize with you. Like, that makes sense, because what the fuck else are you going to do? But there are other people who are in situations where they do have power, but they don't use their power because they still want all of the benefits that the artificial aquarium is sort of holding over their head, right? The actresses that had to like sleep with Harvey Weinstein and other fucking degenerates to get a movie part. Can you believe that she he told her if she wanted the part, she had to fuck him? And everybody's like, oh my God, that's this. And I'm like, excuse me, did she get the part? Like, because if she didn't get the part, oh man, that's fucked up, But wait a minute. He made an offer and she took it and then she got the part. I thought they were adults. I thought they were like, I don't understand what's going on here, Or I'll give you a different example, right? So people don't think I'm just bashing women. The guy, Terry Crews, big black guy. I don't know if he played football before. Maybe that's racist, that I'm assuming that he did. But I think he may have. But you guys know who Terry Crews is. He was giving an interview once during that whole Me Too bullshit, where he said he was like at some Hollywood party and some like really fucking powerful producer grabbed his crotch or something, like making a joke with everybody, and he felt violated. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? It's like you're built like a fucking cyborg. Like, so you picked him up by his throat and threw him through the wall, right, Terry Crews? No, no. I just went sadly to the other room and pouted. Like I was violated. He was over there, probably grabbing his chest. Everybody grabs their chest. Like, did he grab your chest, Terry? No, but this is like when you're violated, you're supposed to do this. I'm being a dick. But the idea of it is I'm not playing any of that shit. Like, listen, I'm not somebody that, let me say this strategically. I'm in the aquarium. I'm not of the aquarium. It's it's not an easy life to navigate when you are trying to be as honest with yourself as you can be, and who you are happens to be somebody not of the aquarium. I'll say it cryptically like that, but I also understand that anything I don't like that I tolerate is on me. I'm never going to look to blame somebody else or this. Even if you hear that from me, understand it's probably manipulation, right? Because that's the essence of struggle. It's like you look at what is it, the Planet of the Apes? They had the interaction when one ape was being submissive to the other, like he put his hand out, and and the more dominant one like basically scratched it to dismiss him, and it's like this submissive posture. It's like, yeah, that's what you do because you want to live, right up until you don't want to live, and that doesn't happen, and then that's when things go big. We could say that, right? So last thing I wanted to cover, and I'll do this quickly. This continues to be the most difficult thing that people have to deal with when confronting all of these topics and forces that I've been discussing the last hour. Most of society is going to slide through that chain of submission. This is the default. It's inevitable. I said at the beginning of this, and it's appropriate to bring up now, I don't do this because I'm trying to change the world. The world's fucked. But I'm doing this to strengthen my positions, to put a message out, right? The signal out so that other people that resonate with it will connect with me. I just spent last weekend in the mountains of Pennsylvania at my PressureCon event with people from all over the country. What brought them together? Me putting this word out. And some of these people are very functional allies in my life. And it was born of this message that I put out, but eventually us, meeting in the real world. Most like today, unless you've done the work to really forge who you're around, most of your circle is already owned by other identities. It's like, who's really ride or die with you? There are people that still stop at red lights at intersections in the middle of nowhere because it's the right thing to do. Like, you think they won't turn you in before they lose their life, their cable, their car, their video games, like, you think that they're going to throw that all away because they support you? Maybe. I'd argue that most of them won't. And you'd be delusional or stupid, even, I think is a better word, to think that they would. People like that, you're not saving. Right? Recruit, don't convert. Trying to help weak people, and I say this from personal experience, and by the way, there's nothing that I talk about that isn't a position developed on me getting this wrong for years, most times. And then finally figuring my way out of that ditch that I created myself, where this is a big one. Most people, they're not going to follow you. They're not going to become stronger just because of how happy you are that you've become stronger. They're not going to go back up the chain. But while you're waiting for them to do that, while you're rooting for them to do that, you're becoming weaker and weaker and weaker as a result. It's not easy being powerful, but it's not supposed to be. But you can't ignore the implications of becoming powerful when it comes to severing those alliances that you have that are doing nothing but holding you back. It's if you're somebody who really values being tall, right? You want to be tall, but you're not tall, and all your friends are really short. Well, yeah, I could see it's going to be hard to walk away from those friends who validate, the currency of your value, your most prominent value. Just weird example to illustrate my point. If you have an identity that is designed to pursue a value that your weak group is providing you, just understand that that is the game you've chosen to play. It's like the guy who dates the hot porn star and suddenly tells her to no longer do porn. It's like, dude, you married a porn star and everything that comes along with that. Sometimes people have friends that they've grown up with, that they've spent, all sorts of time with, that even had a bunch of experiences with. But then the individual starts investing in himself. He starts becoming more powerful. He starts coming to these realizations. He starts, overcoming obstacles that have always held him back. And then he looks at his crew and goes, okay, like, you guys ready? Like, let's go. Let's do this together. And they're all like, oh, like, relax. We're not about that. What are you doing? They don't say it like that. They'll say things like, oh, you've changed, or you're just worried about this now, or you think you're better than us, or you used to spend a lot of time with us, you don't anymore. That's how it winds up coming out. But what is it? It's just people acknowledging that, no, man, I'm getting back in the chain. And you give them enough time, you keep going, at some point they're going to curse you. At some point, you'll become the very easy target of blame for their own circumstances. This is as inevitable as anything. So it's not about making those weak people strong. It's about getting rid of those weak people as soon as possible. By the way, I'm not saying just outright rejecting them. You can look at my parasite killer video. I talk about setting the criteria. It's like, if we're going to chill, this is what you got to do. You got to train. You got to lift. You got to read. You got to do all these different things to become more powerful. You do that, we'll be thick as thieves as we ever were. But if you don't, got to go. Don't know what to tell you. That needs to be the approach. All right, guys, I'm over an hour. Guys got me fired up today. I appreciate it. I hope that went well. And I'm saying it out loud again, so I remember. In tomorrow's email, I will put a link to the chain of submission that I had showed earlier. All right, folks, I appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out. If you're not getting my emails, go to masterchimletter.com and sign up. You know the deal. I will be here next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.